Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray.
Today we feature a conversation.
Hi, this is Tom Long. Today we're going to talk about the movie Some Kind of Wonderful, which I recall seeing in the theater in the 80s while in middle school with a group of friends, and I'm not sure if you were there, Garrett. Do you recall seeing that at the Escondido Twin Village Cinema?
For me, watching it this week to prepare for our conversation was my first experience with it that I remember.
It's a little rom-com that deals with some very one-dimensional characters as they navigate, high school and romance, and it's a fun little jaunt. It's great to show how you can take such a simple story and then just let the characters play. You have Keith, the artistic quiet boy, who's literally from the wrong side of the tracks, and the girl next door he's infatuated with, played by Leah Thompson. I should mention Keith is played by Eric Stoltz, who was quite the pretty boy back in the 80s. So Leah Thompson's character is Amanda Jones, who is dating, the rich boy who drives, a fancy car and is always well-dressed and is a total prick.
He more than a little bit resembled Matt Gaetz to me.
Exactly. And then you have the best friend of Keith, Eric Stoltz's character, is Watts, played by Mary Stuart Masterson, who is the rugged tomboy character girl, who just is into her drums and apparently Eric Stoltz and Keith.
Yeah.
It's a play on the love triangle. Like, I like this boy likes this girl likes this guy. And it just, that whole silliness.
It spins. I did just a little bit of internet digging, and apparently this partly comes out of Pretty in Pink, where that movie resolves to the pretty boy gets the girl rather than the best friend gets the girl. I was overinvested in that piece of the movie once it's perfectly clear that Watts, the Mary Stuart Masterson character, is completely into Keith. Because at a certain point in my young life, a close friend became my romantic infatuation, and indeed, I won her over to become the missus, although she proposed to me. It took a little while to get that circuit to go. But while that was happening, you watch this other person be involved with other people who are not bad people exactly, but they're not suitable in the way that you feel you are. So I was very sympathetic to her position once I was hip to what the dynamics were. What is your connection? What did you take away from this movie when you were a young person seeing it in a theater?
Well, I think I identified with the Keith Nelson character because I came from humble beginnings, poor family, living on the wrong side of the tracks, as it were, and I was also studying art. He's a working class boy. He's a mechanic, which nowadays, if you're a mechanic, you'd be making bank. So I don't know why that. It's weird to see that that made him humble. Being, greasy hands every day after school working, that would be a great job for anybody right now. And of course, he has the one-dimensional dad played by John Ashton, who recently passed away. And he was just in the Beverly Hills Cop sequel. Was it Axel Foley?
Right.
Number 4. He was great in it. What I like about these older films is a lot of times these slice-of-life ones kind of encapsulate what's going on in society at the time. And so John Ashton's character, the dad, is a working-class stiff who's totally obsessed with his kids going to college because he feels that's their only escape. Which, as we all know about what's going on now, there's so many people out there with college degrees who can't even find a basic job right now.
Yeah, the world has changed. But there were some telling moments in the movie that describe exactly that issue. And some of it is just the historicity of movies as an object. There's a scene, maybe you remember, when this father, Craig, that's John Ashton, was calling his boy over to say, hey, you know what I learned today? The interest rates at the bank went up 0.25% to 6 3/4. It's an incredible achievement that interest could ever have been that high. And in retrospect, I can remember my parents worrying over those kinds of issues as debtors, not as people with assets. Today, if I had $1 million, maybe I could get 3.5% to 4%. To imagine a kid with an after-school job can put his money away and earn that kind of money back in the middle 80s is shocking. But he ties that means you can afford more. You've completed the savings necessary to go off to school, so you don't have to be a 6 days a week working dude like me. You can be better. That idea of better is really important to the old man, and I've certainly heard that in elders in my family and in my life in general. And now that I am an elder to younglings, I'm worried about how I can direct them and help them, or shepherd them rather, to what's better than whatever I've done. And I'm just clueless. I don't know. The idea of college being the thing that's going to get you through, like you point out, is not something I any longer feel is sure. It's a guess.
That scene you're talking about, that struck a chord with me too, because when he talks about the interest rate going up, he also adds on there, that'll earn you an extra $16 a year.
Yeah.
What will $16 buy you now? That's minimum wage.
There are other little historical notes in the movie that stick out that way. The way that people are smoking casually. The kids are openly drinking at parties. They're hustling it into school. And maybe kids were always this way, but I remember being very tense around kids who were on the rough edge of things, who had cigarettes or were maybe smuggling in substances, and tried to give them a wide berth for fear it would contaminate me in some way. Anyway, to be reminded that that was the case then was sort of fun. I was pubescent when this movie came out. I was noticing the kinds of girls and boys that this is placing in front of us as played by then mid-20s people trying to pass like they're high schoolers, which didn't quite work. But, you can forgive some things because it's movie fantasy.
That brings up the other character I was going to mention, who I think steals the show every time he's in a scene, is Elias Koteas.
Yeah.
He was great, because he was such a quirky character and just, did whatever. But that ties back to what we're talking about, all these one-dimensional characters, is he was the rough edge boy, but he's got a heart of gold. The big, simple plot of the movie is boy likes girl, boy wants to take girl on a date. He waits until she has a falling out with her current boyfriend, asks her out. He's attracted to this person, and so a lot of the scenes, while they're kind of fleshing out the story, he's just like kind of staring or leering or watching from the sidelines. By today's standards, that's got a creeper vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Leering can get you fired from a job for harassment these days,
That's right, yeah. That's a good note, because he does that a lot. He's caught out doing it by the current boyfriend, his rival, Hardy, who doesn't like it. This is my property, and you're admiring her without my permission. He even says as much, which is a doubling down on sex values and the change in roughly 40 years of the culture of America. But you're right. And he's not being shy about it. He's creeping around to go by her place on the way home from work in the afternoons and spying on her, quite literally spying from behind poles and things.
Yeah.
Eric Stoltz, you nasty boy.
The interesting thing about that, I had a female coworker who once shared, because I don't know if you have to do this, but I've had to go through annual sexual harassment trainings.
Yeah.
But the thing that always comes back to when I had a female coworker who explained this is like, look, the difference between flirting and harassment is whether the recipient welcomes it. That same thing is still being brought up in modern entertainment, because Ted Lasso, there's a repetitive joke, is like the guys keep asking, like, how do you know when a girl likes you? And the female characters always say, you don't. But the interesting thing about this film is, so he's geared toward the date. They have the date. He shows her the painting he does of her, because he's an art student at heart, and she really likes it. But then they go have a real conversation, like their first real conversation, and they call each other out. It's Leah Thompson's character says, like, that's not my soul up there on the thing. That's my face. You just know my face. You're just using me to, have an escape. And then he calls her out. You just went on this date with me to, get back revenge on your ex-boyfriend. That's the kind of, realism that you don't get in a lot of rom-coms. It's like, okay, what are we really looking for here?
That is a good moment, and they do it in this giant amphitheater after hours where they're there by them. He's arranged a lot of cool stuff with people he knows and his dollars that he's earned over these years that he's not using to go to college because he's blowing it on this giant event. I'm thinking about this partly from the point of view of John Hughes, who wrote it and then produced the movie and hired a friend, Howard Deutch, who eventually marries Leah Thompson. They had met somewhere along there. So that remains a going concern. They've got a good thing, and they have for all of these years. Regardless, the idea of using the message of a person who is visually organized, like a visual artist, like a painter, like Keith is, who sees surfaces better than everybody else and observes the details of material reality better than everybody else, so much so that he can capture it properly and then with his craftsmanship create a really wonderful oil painting or a sketch or whatever it might be. And we see this happen over and over. He's very gifted. But that does elide the fact he can't get inside of somebody because he's not willing to risk himself. His portrayal of self is through his mastery of a craft, but not his expression of who he is. The only person who sees behind that is his buddy Watts, who's deeply in love with him, with it seems an abusive background, which is hinted at but not explored. So that's a gap in the movie. She's a tomboy, yes, this is a forgivable thing. It's not even a problem for a lot of, I think, forward-thinking adults and young people both. But I suppose in the 80s it was a signal that she's a lesbian. There are jokes about this. It's a signal that she's somehow decrepit or weird or barren or whatever. but she's able to not be putting forward the outward display of conventional beauty because she is more connected to his deeper person. That scene you're mentioning is a good one because suddenly Leah Thompson's character, Amanda Jones, right? Amanda Jones has real intelligence. She has been betrayed with her physical beauty and played to the mask of what she seems to be. But there's not just a beating heart, there's a deep soul. And everybody's robbed her of that. They all consider her just a pinup. And there it is. He makes a beautiful painting, but there she is hanging on the wall. That's quite delicious. And I have to imagine John Hughes was just chewing on that for years. Like, how can I make a conventionally beautiful woman say these things and then call out some boy? So he casts beautiful Eric Stoltz to be the recipient. And he's cool about it because he realizes, you're right. I did use you that way. And then suddenly they become intimate. That's nice.
Yeah, and then the unconventional Mary Stuart Mastrom, like, by today's standards, I think they wouldn't even... She's very beautiful, and like that would be like her attire, her persona would be kind of commonplace. She's the only girl with short hair. All of them had the big poofy, standing up like 8 inches tall, which I remember. I don't know if you do.
I do remember. Yeah, and the effort to brush it up and the hairspray, and I remember. You don't want to go out on a humid day, no rain. Yeah, it was a whole thing to create the avalanche of hair.
Of course, after they have their moment, there's the conflict thing is that, he's going to take her to this party that her ex-boyfriend invited her to under false pretenses that, he's cool with them dating. Typical wealthy kid, lies to everybody about his intentions. He's got a girlfriend on the side. He's telling his buddies that his ex-girlfriend is in on it and he's just going to humiliate this guy, Eric Stoltz, and his character and beat him up. And then you have that wonderful Duncan character swoop in again with, his rowdy boys to, save the day, as it were.
It's a plan that way, and they become buddies, Keith and Duncan, because Keith, in some goofy kind of effort to get closer to Amanda, does something wrong to get detention, which of course is where Duncan and his homies hang out every single day. But they gradually learn to see through each other because they both have an interest in different ways in doing art. There's also another scene which connects these things together, and it's when finally Keith gets the nerve up to shout back at his father. They have a confrontation because the old man realizes my son has withdrawn all of his money, earning 6 3/4%, and it's gone. So we got to put it back in the bank. That's not the plan. And Keith explains, you're not listening to me. The plan that you've got for me is your plan. It's not one I've organized. I didn't agree. You've never asked what my opinion is, and now I'm an adult. I'm 18, and my pursuit is different than what you want from me. Because that happens, Keith also explains to his old man, the awkward kids that you grew up with who had no peers, they had no social group, they were outsiders. That's me, Dad. That was a real signal because I can recall really feeling that strongly, not by high school because I had found a group by then, but certainly through, say, 6th grade up into 8th grade, feeling like I didn't know where I fit, but it was clear that there were groups, and I was walking in between all of them. And Duncan, interestingly, once you get past the roughness, is, as you say, heart of gold, like, cool. We can be different, and that's okay. I will still be your friend and protector, which is very useful in the conclusion of the piece, when they take on the bad guy. And they don't go to fisticuffs, but it's clear that they have collectively unmanned the rich boy, who's a prick without any backbone, by exposing exactly that in front of everybody.
Leah Thompson's character, as they're walking out of the party, and Mary Stuart Masterson Watt's character walks off and says, "You guys take the car." And she could tell that she's relieved that her Keith didn't get his ass kicked. Leah Thompson's character sees the feelings she has for him, whereas Keith can't. That was a nice scene, but it's like, I don't even think he was aware yet. So did he?
Yeah, it happens too quickly. He's been thick for an hour and a half, and in 1 minute of screen time, turns the corner and everything's cool. While I want that for Watts, because I do prefer her as a person who more resembles actual people I have known, it's too pat.
It's still a good, solid ending.
Because you do want it to end up that way, particularly because Amanda is the one who says, it's okay for me to stand on my own and not rely on somebody, and I absolve you. You really are actually projecting onto me all of the vibes, feelings, and close, intimate connection you have with her that you thought you would have with me from all these years of observing me. But the fact is, you've built those feelings practicing with her, including that really winning scene when Watt says, hey, you should practice kissing because I don't think you know what you're doing. And it's broken down into close-ups. Your hand should go here, and you see her cinch up her leg around his hips. I mean, it's pretty sexy stuff. When you suggested this title to me, I assumed that you were drawn to Mary Stuart Masterson simply because you find her appealing to a type of girl/woman that you just think is more ideal. And I point that out because there's this ridiculous sequence in the middle of the movie when we are taking the position of Watts in the locker room for PE class as she looks across all of these half-dressed girls at Amanda. It's just like Ripley is depicted at the very end of Alien. We see her abdomen, we see the shape of her body with absolutely nothing concealed except just a little bit of cotton to cover the goodies. And we're seeing it from the position of Watts, who's admiring this physical ideal, and she's looking down at her own body as she's called out immediately afterwards by other pretty girls. She's wearing boys' boxers, which doesn't in any way seem weird now. But because we get that scene from her point of view, we see the stakes, that she is a particular kind of femininity. Remembering you as a young person, that was your jam.
Yeah, it's true. I always liked the girls with the short hair. Actually, my wife now, when I first met her, she had a Watts-style haircut.
We're launching here a kind of a series where we're going to talk about different romance movies. The connective tissue that this movie brings to the front of what romance is how friendship forms the basis of a proper sexual and romantic attachment. And that strikes me as correct. I wish I had been with you that time you went to go see it, and this would have been an interesting lesson into what's to come. I do know from the season that this was released, Lethal Weapon happened, and I know I went out of my way to go see that movie, because you might recall that we had a movie theater, a sixplex, one of the few sixplexes in Southern California that I was aware of, where I would regularly get myself dropped off. While you went to go see Some Kind of Wonderful, and many of our peers I'm sure did, I went running to go see Lethal Weapon because I wanted the violence. I think another way to put it is, though I had a budding appetite at age 14 for this kind of a romantic entanglement, I was willing to engage the classic American problem of let's go deal with violence, but avoid the squishy emotional stuff that's difficult and thorny to sort out, especially when you're an awkward young teen who doesn't have a very good vocabulary to sort it out. And a movie like this one may have provided some of that vocabulary. In other words, be direct, honest, and kind, and listen, which is a clutch lesson in life that this movie does portray in its own funny little way.
Bodies fade. We're all just, a few decades out from just falling apart, but if you like the person you're with, that is the core of the relationship. You need somebody who's going to want to take a walk with you in the park or help you get ready for bed or, do the mundane tasks of daily life.
And then the kissing party after that.
This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks, a conversation between Garrett Chaffin-Quiray and
Tom Long.
Boop boopity doo.